What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to create this love themed Procreate design. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below. I've created a template for the L, O and E, so you can just drop that straight in on your design, and you'll need the dust brush, of course, that have been added in the description. So be sure to grab all of that as well as the palette and canvas size, and when you're done, you'll have everything you need for today's design. Now, if you didn't already know, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel for Procreate, but I also post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month, but over on my Patreon. If you want to become a supporter over on Patreon, I'll leave a link in the description down below. And with all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we're going to want to go ahead and do is add in our little template of the L, O and E. So you're going to need to save the image to your gallery, and then all we're going to want to do is go up to the actions up here. If we go to the option of add, we can then choose the option to insert a photo. And once in your gallery, once you find the image, you just tap on it and it will drop it onto the canvas, and it should be smack bang in the center. If it's not, just simply go down to snapping and make sure snapping is turned on, and then we just want to drop it on the orange lines both horizontally and vertically. That lets you know you're in the center of your canvas. Then we can hit the cursor when we're done. So now we've got that in place, we can now go ahead and start to add in all the different layers that we're going to need to separate this out. So the first thing we'll do is create what I call the top frame. It keeps everything underneath it nice and contained within this sort of shape. So we're going to go to our layers. This layer here for our image, we're going to tap on it and use the option of select. It's very important that you make sure color fill is grayed out and is not turned on. And you want to invert the selection. So selection normally would select this, but we want to select everything but that. So we've now selected everything around the outside. And then when we go to our layers, with that selection still active, we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we'll grab this middle color in the first column. We'll go to our layers, and this empty layer at the top, we'll tap on it and we'll use the option of fill. You won't see too much of a visual change on screen, but what we now have is a frame and the image underneath in the gap. Now I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer just so you know what I'm referring to throughout the rest of the design. I'm going to call this frame, and I'll also rename our image here, and I'm going to call this template so that we have the template named ready to go. So on this top frame, the first thing we want to go ahead and do is add in some texture. So we're going to create a new layer and we're going to tap on it and clip it to the frame. So now it will only show on the light grey area around the outside. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here at the top of the first column. It's almost black. And we're going to go to our brush library, and you'll need to find the canvas texture that I've added in the description down below. But I've got it here in my Halloween set because that's where it originated from. And my brush size is going to be set to 100% and the opacity set to 100. Now you want to be really light and you want to give the entire screen a nice coat of the texture. So I'm going backwards and forwards, and I'm trying to keep my pressure again really light. We don't want to add too much of this texture, but enough that we've got that canvasy look to it. And that's that done. We can actually go to that layer, tap on it and merge it down. I kept it on a separate layer for you just in case you want to lower the opacity of it if you pressed a little bit too firm. The next step is to go to our layers, and we're actually going to move the template above the frame. And for a minute, we're going to go ahead and just turn it off. So we'll turn off the template. That will reveal the background color underneath, but I want to add in the correct background color. So I'm going to go to my layers and create another new layer and drag it underneath your frame. Then we'll go to our colors. We'll grab this color here. It is the 4th color on the top row, as in the 4th column. We'll drag that color onto the screen. And then we're going to go to our colors and we'll grab the 3rd color on the top row. So I'm talking about columns. So the 3rd column, top color. And we'll go to our brush library, and again you're going to need to find, it's probably right at the very bottom for you under imported, but you're going to need to go ahead and find the dust brush that I've provided in the description, and this is the one here. And what we're going to do is just going to make the brush size fairly large, about sort of 34%, and just give a very light coat of texture, super light, just to change up that background color just a little bit for the moment. Now let's get started on adding in our hearts, and that will really help us build up the rest of the design. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer right at the very top. And we can actually for a minute turn off our frame and our layer here at the bottom. So all the layers underneath are turned off for a minute. They're ready to go when we need them again. And we're going to go to our colors and grab that color at the top of the 4th column. we're going to go to our actions. We're going to go ahead and go to our canvas, and we're going to go and add on a drawing guide. And if you go to edit drawing guide, we're going to use symmetry, and we're going to make sure the option is set to vertical. Then we're going to hit done, and we're going to go ahead and go to our brush. We're going to go to calligraphy and the monoline brush, and the brush size doesn't really matter, but I've got it sort of maxed out at the minute. We're going to go ahead and draw a circle on one side, and then hold your pen down and pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's nice and perfect. And you can kind of get them touching. A little tip though, if you make them a little bit too big, just go up here to edit circle, and you can move it until the two are touching just in the middle there, which is going to be the center of our heart. And then we're going to go ahead and go back to our brush, and from there we can go ahead and create a bit of an arc. So from this side over here, just create a bit of an arc that runs down into the middle. Hold your pen down when you're done, and again you can go to edit arc, and we can just adjust this point here if we want to make it a little bit taller or a little bit shorter. It's totally up to you, but you want to make sure this node lands perfectly on there, and the other side of your arc just runs smoothly into the circles. And then all we want to do is just drag the color into the gaps, and we've got our heart. So before we carry on, let's add some color to this. So we're going to go ahead and go to the layer, we're going to tap on it, and we're going to go ahead and alpha lock it, meaning we can't paint outside of it. And also we're going to tap on the layer and turn off the drawing assist, which now means it's not going to use the symmetry line down the middle, it's going to keep things unique on either side. So I'm going to go to my colors, I'm going to grab this color here at the top of the 5th column. We're going to go to our brush library, and now what you should be able to do is go right to the top of your brush library and go to recent at the very top, and you should have a bunch of your different brushes. So the last few ones we've used, such as the dust brush, we can reuse that one here. So using recent and the dust brush, and the brush size is set to 41%. Now I'm just going to go ahead and darken up the bottom right edge, and we're just going to add in some of this beautiful texture. Now our light source is going to be top left throughout the whole of the design, so that's where we're going to add in our shadows. And I'll go ahead and make the brush size a bit smaller, maybe down to about sort of 20%, and just shadow in here as well, where that lighting's maybe not making its way all the way across. So it doesn't have to be anything super special, just something like this. And then we'll go to our colors. We'll grab this color here at the top of the 3rd column. Make our brush size back up again, maybe even up to the 41% again. And we will go ahead and brighten up the top left edge. So we'll go ahead and just over here, brighten that up where our light source is, and try to add a nice brighter patch up there, and bring the lighting round the body a little bit. Likewise, we can just reduce the brush size down to maybe 25, and just up the top of this side here as well, circular motion, just sort of fade that in towards the body. You should end up with these really, really nice tones all blending into one another. And if you want to, you can just overlap some of your shadows just to take away from them if you've added a little bit too much. So I've just faded out that one there at the top. So we're going to use this heart now multiple times to space within our little L shape. So before we go further, let's go ahead and go up to our actions and turn off the drawing guide. We're then going to go ahead then and bring in our rest of our design. So we're going to turn on the frame, and we're going to turn on the background at the very bottom that we created. And now using this layer, we're going to create our little layout for everything, and then we're going to focus on the filler hearts. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drag this heart underneath our frame. So we're going to drag that down under the frame. We're going to go ahead and we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it and turn off the top one. That's going to be the one we go back to and duplicate multiple times. We're then going to grab the one that's still turned on, and we're going to grab our cursor, and using the uniform option, you just want to scale this down, and we're going to start to position them. Now the ones we're about to do now are the ones that are going to sort of exaggerate and leave the shape of the L a little bit, and we're only going to add in 3 of those. We don't want to add in too many, otherwise it'll look like too many things are trying to escape. So I'm going to add in a heart and then just rotate this round, and I might make this a little bit smaller, but to the point where it covers up this bottom left corner. But this curve here of the heart is going to be the bit that we chop out of the L, and it will just leave the L. So we'll make this a little bit bigger. I'll move that across again, and that's going to be my main heart that's going to just leave that edge later on. So I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. That's one position done. We're going to go to our layers. We'll go up to the one that's turned off, and we'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Then the bottom one out of these two, just turn one back on. Grab your cursor, And we'll scale this down in size again. I'm going to rotate this to the right this time, and I'm going to position one down here. Now I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and what I'm going to focus on is I want this edge here of the heart to run almost directly into that corner. So I want it to sort of go right down into that corner, meaning later on I'll reveal that curve here, and again it will look like it's leaving the L. So I might rotate this a little bit further, maybe even make it a little bit bigger, and then making sure that this corner here is almost pixel perfect to the corner itself. So if I tap on my cursor when I'm done and zoom out, that's what we're going for there. So these two are going to leave the L later on. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers, and we're going to duplicate the top one again, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. And the bottom one out the two again, go to your layer and turn it on. Grab your cursor, scale the heart down, and we'll position one up here towards the top right, or the very top right corner up here anyway, of our L. So again, I'm going to leave the left side because the way the shadows are coming across, we don't want anything to leave the L on the left. We want it all to leave the L on the right. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. And I'm going to make sure that if I zoom in, this edge here is cropped, but at the top here, we maybe just bring it up and out a little bit. So it will go across that straight line, bump outwards, and then come round as it reveals the rest of the shape. Then I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. So those three there are the main ones that again are going to leave our L. We're then going to go to our layers, and we're going to group them together. So we'll just swipe them from left to right until all three are grouped, and we'll hit group, and then we'll rename that, and we'll call these main hearts. Then we're going to go ahead and grab the one that we made earlier. We'll collapse the main hearts down for a second. We will go ahead and grab that other heart, and we'll drag it underneath our main hearts. We'll swipe it to the left again and duplicate it, and somewhat repeat the process, except now we're going to go ahead and try to fill in the gaps. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these hearts now, group them together, and we're going to call these filler. So these are going to be our filler hearts. Then we're going to go ahead and turn on either one of them. It doesn't really matter. I'll turn on the bottom one just so we're consistent with the rest of them. So we'll grab this one here. We'll grab our cursor. We'll use the uniform option, making sure it stays the exact same proportions. And we'll start to scale this down. So I'm going to sort of position one maybe here. Maybe a bit bigger than that, just to fill up a bit of space like so. Tap on my cursor when I'm done. And then I'm going to maybe go to my layers, swipe that heart to the left and duplicate it again. Grab my cursor, and maybe move this one down into here, where maybe I'll rotate it the other way, scale it down in size, and just position it in the gap. So we're just trying to fill in some gaps. You don't need to fill in absolutely everything either. If you have a bit of a gap, like for example, this little corner here and this little corner here, that's perfectly fine. Then we'll go to our layers, and we'll just keep repeating it now and add in hearts as we go further back. And that's why I'm duplicating the layer to the left and duplicating it, grabbing the bottom one and grabbing my cursor so that now I know it all sits behind that heart. We're stacking things as we go backwards. I'm going to rotate this one and maybe sit this one into here. I'm going to go to my layers, swipe that one to the left and duplicate it, grab the bottom one and grab my cursor, and I'll position another one slightly further up, a little bit smaller, and in the gap, just like so. Then I'm going to go to my layers again, swipe that one to the left and duplicate it, grab my cursor, rotate it the other way, and maybe just position one in here, where maybe I'll make this one a little bit bigger, and maybe even rotate it in from the edge a bit more. So maybe a bit more vertical, but something that sits in that gap there. And hit the cursor when you're done. And I think the only one I want to add in is one more down here. So I'm going to go to my layers. I'll grab the last one we were working on and swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab the bottom one. Grab my cursor. Maybe make that a bit bigger. Rotate it into this space here, just so we've got a little bit more filler in that gap. And then tap on my cursor when I'm done. And they're going to act as our background hearts. So what we then want to do is we want to go ahead and these filler hearts, we'll collapse the group down. So we'll tap on this arrow here, we'll tap on the group and we'll go to flatten. And that's going to merge them all onto one layer, which will nicely save on your layer count. We're going to go ahead and swipe those hearts to the left and duplicate them. And we'll select both of them again and group them again. So we'll rename that group and we'll call them filler hearts. So trying to label your layers a lot of the time will really help you later on. And the bottom layer out of these two hearts, the layer should be alpha locked. If it's not, tap on it and alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab this color here at the top of the 5th column. We'll go back to the layer, tap on it and use the option of fill, and tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. So we've now filled it in with our shadow color so that we can now go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur. We're going to swipe from left to right, and something maybe around about sort of 9 to 10 will do the trick, I would imagine. Then grab our cursor and we'll drag that down towards the bottom right down here so that that's where our lighting is coming from. So we'll end up with a nice little bit of a drop shadow in behind there, and tap on our cursor when we're done. Now that's going to really bring in some of those shadows later on. So the next step then, if we go to our layers, we can collapse the filler hearts down. If you want to save on your layer count, you can even tap on it and flatten it down onto one layer. But what we're now going to go ahead and do is cut out the main hearts from our frame. So we're going to go to our frame, we're going to tap on it, and we're going to use the option of mask. So we'll add a perfectly white mask to the top, and you want to make sure you're on the mask and that your color is set to black. So you can double tap at the bottom of the disk. We'll go back to our layers. We're going to open up our main hearts, and we're going to go ahead and basically select the shape of them. So if I turn this on and off, you'll see it's the one at the very top there. We're going to tap on it and use the option of select. It will now select that shape. If I go to my layers while that selection is still active and go to the mask at the top of our frame, and I go ahead and zoom in, I'm going to go to my brush library and go to the monoline brush, making sure my monoline brush is maxed out in size. I can just go ahead now and just start to erase that part from the frame. Now if we tap on our selection tool, you can see now that that will leave the L. You may notice also a very white faint gap here. If we go to our layers quickly and we tap on our template at the top and use the option of tap on it and use the option of select, then go to your layers and then go ahead and go to the frame, not the mask, and tap on it and just use the option of clear. I think there's a little bit of excess there. So all we did there was just cut out the template again from this area here. So that's it. We've now revealed that heart leaving the L. How cool does that look? Let's do the same down here. So we're going to go to our layers. The next heart is this one here in the bottom right. So we'll tap on that heart, use the option of select. We'll go to our layers and we'll go to the mask for the frame. And again, zoom in. Now this is the only one where you need to be a little bit more careful. We just got to start at the top, make our way down. And all we want to do is just run into that corner as I mentioned earlier. We don't want to reveal this down here because that ruins the illusion. And if we tap on our selection tool when we're done, that heart's now allowed to sort of escape from the L. And let's do the same for the final one. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go to the last heart, which is this one here. Tap on it and use the option of select. So select that shape. Go back to your layers and go to the mask on the frame. And then just erase this corner here. And then you should now have 3 hearts that are all escaping from the L. How cool does that look? Now what we're going to go ahead and do is add in some highlights and shadows to this L. So we're going to go ahead then and collapse the main hearts down. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer. So if we tap on the main hearts group, create a new layer, it will sit above, and we want it to sit directly underneath our frame. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors and making sure we're using this color here at the top of the 5th column. We're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go ahead and go to a new brush that we've not used so far in this, which is airbrushing and the soft brush. And the brush size, I've got it set to about 8%. What we're going to do is introduce a shadow. Now our light source is coming from the top left down to the bottom right. So we need to add a shadow down this edge, this top edge, and also this edge here. So we'll do exactly that. We'll just very lightly just go down this edge a few times, just building in this bit of color until you slowly start to build it up and you'll reveal that shadow, and it will sit on top of all your hearts for a minute. So don't worry, we will amend them in a second. And then we'll go ahead and do the same at the top. We'll go ahead and just add in that top shadow. And then what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on this area here and maybe just reduce our brush size down to maybe 4% and just bring that in from the edge to roughly where we know that it's going to run to, like there, isn't it? So we're just going to introduce the same sort of level of shadow, Just build that up and build that up and ignore the bit that runs onto the heart. Again, we'll sort that in a second. But immediately you should start to get a little bit more depth. And in fact, I'm going to go back over mine once more with a larger size, about 7%, and just start to fade that out a little bit as it runs into the L a little bit more. Likewise, just a little light gloss over there. Then what we'll do is we'll switch our color to the color underneath it. So it's the middle color in the 5th column. We'll reduce our brush size down to maybe 5%. So then what we're going to do is we're going to introduce this slightly more darker tone towards the edge. And you want to keep this really light. You don't want to add in too much. It's quite a dark contrast. And then roll that round on the top corner there. So I'm just introducing a slightly darker tone, and likewise just under here. Now I'm being super light with my pressure. If you're struggling with your pressure, maybe just drop your opacity down. And then, as I said, we need to adjust some of these shadows to match the rest of the design. So all we need to basically do is erase our heart here from that shadow area, because in certain aspects, such as here, the shadow would not overlap that, of course, because this heart is slightly higher. So all we're going to do is on this layer that we've still got, we're going to go ahead and open our main hearts again. We want this one here in the bottom left, so we're going to grab that one. We're going to tap on it and use the option again of select. So we're using a lot of selections in this just to isolate ourselves in certain areas. So we've selected that heart, and if we go back to the layer here for our shadows, we can go to our eraser, tap on the eraser. You can use something like the soft brush under airbrushing. Just something that's 100% opacity really, and size doesn't matter. We're just going to erase this area here. Tap on your selection, and now it looks much more believable that that shadow is of course underneath this heart. And then up here, we just need to make a minor correction where this edge of the heart is slightly leaning and skewed outwards. So we just need to erase the shadow from this top edge. So we're going to go to our hearts. We're going to find it, which is this one here in our main hearts. We'll tap on it and use the option of select. We'll go back to our shadow layer, and we'll just erase this top edge up here, and only this side. We will leave the shadow that runs over on the opposite side, and tap on your selection tool when you're done. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our layers, and we're going to go ahead and our shadow layer, we're just going to tap on the layer option, so the blend mode, and we'll scroll down until we get to overlay. Now this will make your shadows a lot less sort of dark, and will start to overlap a lot of the colours that are underneath, but they're not quite strong enough, and that is because a lot of the colours in the background are slightly too colourful still. Because they're in a shaded area, we need to really sort of show the user exactly that they are a little bit further back, so they are a little bit more darker. So what we'll do is we'll go to our layers, and this background layer that we made right at the very back, we're going to go to our adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, and we're going to adjust some of these sliders here. So I'm going to go ahead and change my hue. So it was at 50, I've dragged it down to the left at 47. We're going to drag our saturation to 42%, and we're going to bring the brightness down to 48. Nothing too drastic, but it will darken up some of those colors and also somewhat reintroduce those shadows a little bit. So we'll tap on our hue, saturation and brightness adjustments when we're done. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is introduce some shadows from these hearts onto our canvas. So just sort of following the lighting and sort of everything else, just to make everything look nice in 3D. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and collapse the main hearts down. We're done with that. And on our frame up here, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We'll tap on it and we will clip it to the frame. We're then going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to go and grab this color here. So it is the middle color in the 5th column. We're then going to go ahead and go to our brush library, again making sure we're using airbrushing and the soft brush. And what we're going to do is, with our light source, it's coming this way, isn't it? It's coming all the way across. So you want to add a shadow that is from that direction. So I'm going to just introduce a shadow really lightly to start with, just sort of get your positioning right, and then just darken up more so right underneath the actual heart edge, and let that run right to this area here. And you should start to introduce a bit of a shadow like this. Now this area here is not going to get too much of a shadow, but we can try and just sort of emphasize it just to sort of pull off the lighting effect. So this sort of corner down here is where we're going to sort of darken up the most and just fade that shadow out a little bit with some really nice light strokes out to the right. And then over here, this little heart it's coming this way, isn't it? All the way across. So we're going to go ahead and just sort of darken up under here. And for a minute, it's going to run off and be a bit sort of untidy, but we'll fix that in a second. And just introducing a shadow that runs over here. And then when we zoom out, you can get that effect. But we need to tidy this up, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my eraser. The eraser should be set to the soft brush under airbrushing. If we make that a little bit smaller, maybe about 2%, we can just go ahead and just erase this across this horizontal line basically. So we'll just erase that, and we will just roll in the shadow into that corner. So just roll that in like so, and make sure underneath is nice and tidy. Roll that shadow into that corner. And then when you zoom out, they should now have some really nice little shadows on them that are just making our hearts really stand out from the rest of the canvas. And if you want to, you could go to your adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right if you want to just sort of really fade them out a little bit and soften them up a little bit. So I've gone to about 9% there from swiping from left to right. Now, while we're working on some extra shadow and lighting effects, we're just going to add in the tiniest little effects that you might not really see too much of, but they look great. We're going to go to our template at the top. We're going to go ahead and tap on it, and we're going to alpha lock it, meaning we can't paint outside of it. And if we go to our colors, we're going to double tap at the bottom of the disk to select black. We're then going to go back to the layer. We're going to turn it on so we can see it. And we're going to tap on it, and we're going to use the option of fill. Now turn it to black. What we then need to go ahead and do is tap on this layer, and we need to clipping mask it down. So you might not see it now, but it's here. And because there's a hole in the middle, you can't see it because there's no sort of area here for it to show against. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to swipe back to the left and duplicate it. And the top one, tap on it and invert it, which inverts its color from black to white. And then what we'll do is we'll simply grab our cursor. And if we zoom out, the light source is coming from this way. So it will hit the edge of this paper canvas here. So what we want to do is we want to tap 1, 2, and maybe 3, just to add in a really nice little highlight here that runs down the edge of the paper, just where the lighting's coming across. Then what we want to go ahead and do is go to our layers. We're going to go to the black one. Now the black is too strong, so we'll tap on it and we'll lower the opacity right down to 20%. We'll grab our cursor and we'll do the same but in the opposite direction. So we'll tap in the top left, 1, 2, and we'll only do it twice so that our paper then has a dark edge running just down the edge of it here. And it's these slightly small things that will really pull off the effect of that paper kind of cutout look. And it looks predominantly really good around our letters. So that is that little extra shading touch done. What we need to do though is we need to grab our shadows that we made underneath our hearts that are escaping and just drag it above those two template layers. That way the highlights and shadows all make sense. Then what we're going to do is add the heart that's going to sit here for the V. So we're going to go into our main hearts group here, swipe any one of the hearts to the left and duplicate it. And we're going to go ahead and drag that out, and we're going to move it up to the very top of our layers. We're then going to go ahead and grab our cursor and we'll move this heart into here. Now you'll notice it does hide in behind the O and the E, so we need to make this a little bit smaller until it sort of fits in proportion with the rest of it. So something a little bit like this. And so we're kind of making sure that the height, we can make this a little bit bigger like it is, but something like that looks great. And now you've got the V in your love. We're going to go to that layer. We're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. The bottom one out the two, tap on it and make sure it is alpha locked. It should already be. And then we're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab this color here. It is the top of the 5th column. Go back to the layer, tap on it and use the option of fill, and then tap on it and turn off the alpha lock so that we can go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right. We'll add in a good 8% Gaussian blur. We'll then go straight to our cursor. We'll zoom in. We're going to scale this down using uniform option. So scale it down from the top left, and then just that is going to be your shadow. So I'm just going to sort of give it a little bit of distance, and the light source is coming from the top left, of course. So we want to drag our shadow off to the right hand side a little bit. And then when you're happy with the positioning, you can tap on your cursor when you're done. And we can go back to the layer. We can move that across so we can see. We can tap on the N and just lower the opacity until we're happy with sort of the shadow strength. So because there's a little bit of a distance between the heart and the canvas as I'm trying to portray, we can drop this down a little bit just to give off that depth effect. So I've dropped it down to 60%. I'll be happy with that. Tapping away, we then end up with the V for the love. And now we're going to move into some extra details for highlights and shadows. So we're just going to go into our layers. we're going to go down to this layer here at the back. That is our backdrop color. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our colors, making sure we're still on this color here at the top of the 5th column. But we're going to go back to our brush library. I'm going to go right to the top until we get to recent, and I'm going to use that dust brush again. And using the dust brush, let's make the size about 30%. I'm going to just sort of darken up the left edge a little bit more inside the heart, just a tiny bit more. And likewise just across here as well. That's very nice and light on that occasion. And then I'm just going to make it a bit smaller, maybe about sort of 10%, and just add in a little bit of texture over the O and the E, so that there's some speckles in there of the base color, and more so towards that top left edge of the E and the O, just darken that up a little bit more. And then we're going to move into some final highlights which make these hearts really pop. So we're going to go to our layers, we're going to go right to the very top, and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go to this color here at the top of the 3rd column. We're going to go back to the layer, and we're going to make sure we change the blend mode from normal to add. And then using the dust brush, maybe around about sort of that 12% mark, on some of your hearts where you've got the brighter tones, in a circular motion we can just start to really bring in some really beautiful highlights. Now I'm really light with my pressure. Again, you're going to need to be very careful with this, maybe even lower your opacity if you're pretty heavy handed. And we're just going to just push that a tiny bit towards the left, but more so just brightening up this edge here where that lighting's coming across and just hitting the hearts. And this is that final touch that really brings it to life. We're going to zoom in and we're going to take a look at all the hearts. There may be a couple of details that we can add. So maybe I'll reduce the brush size as I go, maybe 6%, and just maybe add in a tiny little bit of these extra beautiful speckles of this brush. Maybe that's even a little bit too much, just a tiny bit on there. Maybe even reduce the brush size really small to 2%, and maybe this heart just at the back's just catching a little bit of light where it's a little bit further back. This heart here, we could maybe just add in a little bit of color onto here, just a tiny bit. And then we've got our main heart. We can definitely make sure our brush goes back up to about that 10% mark, brighten up this area here. And again, I'm keeping the strokes really light, and then just pushing that round. And this is going to be a darker corner because it's technically hidden under the paper. So we're not going to go over there too much, but I'm just going to get as close as I can without sort of breaking the illusion. And then just really brighten this up, giving a really beautiful highlight on there. And if we zoom in, that heart's not going to get anything, neither is this one, so it's just this one. I'm going to reduce the brush size down to about 6%, if not slightly bigger in fact. We'll go up to about 8% and just brighten up this edge here, just where it's getting some really nice light, and here as well. And fade that into the body. You kind of create this like U shape here. And just let that run in there. They have really stepped out of that design now. And we're not going to leave this one out either. So we're going to go ahead and reduce the brush size maybe to something that fits the size of the heart, maybe 5%. If not bigger again, I can actually get away. I'm kind of misjudging it a little bit, so I can brighten up this area here for sure. And likewise just here at the top. So again, you're creating that kind of U shape, but leaving the dark side, of course. So just adding in those lovely little sort of speckles on top of the heart, which really makes that come to life. And then the final touch is to go back into the hearts. So we've got this heart here, for example, in the V shape. It is already alpha locked. If it's not, tap on it and alpha lock it. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this extra color here in the middle of the 3rd column. Reduce your brush size maybe down to about 3% if you can get there, and just go ahead and just brighten up the very left edge. So this is a manual change, just brightening up that top left edge, adding in just an extra little bit of highlight, and maybe even reduce the brush size down again just to really brighten that up, and maybe just a little bit over here. If we zoom out, we're just going to do the same for these layers as well. So we'll go back to our main hearts. First heart is the one at the top, so I'll go ahead and zoom in on this area, and I'm just going to add a highlight that's just going to run down this edge here. So just a really nice bright highlight in there. And that's just another little extra bit of lighting that will help that stand off. We'll go back to our heart. The next one down is the one in the bottom right, I believe, down here. So I'm just going to introduce again a brighter tone on that top left edge. Maybe a tiny little bit in here too. And then we'll go back to our main heart here, and that one is there in the bottom left. Zoom in on this and we'll add in a highlight just on this top edge, roll that round and just push that in towards the center, maybe the tiniest bit on there too. And so if I go ahead and zoom in, we fill the canvas and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this Valentine's Day themed design. As always, please be sure to tag me in your creations over on Instagram. When you're done, there'll be links to all my socials, my Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere I am will be in the description down below. And if you like this video, please drop a like down below, and for weekly tutorials, hit the subscribe button. Now, as always, a massive shout out to all of my supporters over on Patreon. If you want to get your name featured in videos, access to 3 exclusive tutorials every single month, sneak peeks of upcoming designs and much more, hit the link in the description down below. And if you like this video, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. So as always, thank you so much for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.